My wife whispered in my ear at my boss's funeral. Your promotion was a pity gift. Everyone knows you're a joke. My team burst out laughing. 2 weeks later, I received a letter that turned my life, and hers, into a national impropriety. Me, why would you say that? At a funeral? Her, leans in, whispers like she's telling me a secret. Your promotion was a pity gift. Everyone knows you're a joke. My coworkers heard. Some laughed. I just stood there in the pew, pretending my chest hadn't just caved in. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, evidence that would burn everything down: my career, my marriage, and my belief that I ever really knew her at all. I'm not sure when it all began, but I can tell you exactly when I realized something was horribly wrong. It was the day of my boss's funeral. Marshall Keene, 61 years old, massive heart attack in his sleep. He'd run our architecture firm in downtown Chicago like a general, tough, brilliant, but fair. Not someone who gave out praise or promotions easily, which is why it mattered when he promoted me to senior partner just 8 weeks before he died. We were standing in St. Hedwig's Cathedral in Wicker Park. The snow outside was coming down in that quiet, heavy way it does when it wants to make sure you remember the day. Everyone was dressed in black. I stood near the front with Celia, my wife of 17 years. We'd been together since college, back when I was sketching buildings and composition books, and she was already dreaming of politics and philanthropy. The church was packed. You could smell perfume, cologne, and the faint scent of wet wool. People whispered in respectful tones. The choir was singing. That's when she leaned in. No emotion on her face. Not even a smirk. Just a whisper in my ear like she was sharing some gossip about the flowers. Your promotion was a pity gift. Everyone knows you're a joke. I remember her breath was warm. I remember the woman behind us stifled a cough. I remember 3 of my coworkers, people I worked with for over a decade, looking at me, then each other, and laughing. Quietly, but unmistakably. I didn't respond. Not right away. My brain couldn't make sense of it. I just stood there, staring at the altar, while the weight of her words dropped into my gut like a stone. We didn't talk about it afterward. We went to the reception. She smiled, made small talk, held my arm like nothing had happened. I watched her out of the corner of my eye all night. She never looked back at me. That night, I laid in bed beside her, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't trust myself not to explode if I did. But I couldn't sleep. My mind was unraveling every moment of the past few months: her late nights, the time she deflected conversations about work, the passive-aggressive comments I thought were just stress. The next morning, I started to notice things. At work, the energy was off. Conversations paused when I entered rooms. I saw looks exchanged behind coffee mugs. When I tried to insert myself into project meetings, I was told, "Oh, sorry, thought you were informed it was moved." A pattern. I convinced myself I was being paranoid until the envelope arrived. 2 weeks after the funeral, a plain cream-colored envelope landed on my desk at home. No return address. No postage stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it or slipped it into the building's mailroom. Inside was a letter, neatly typed. It accused me of financial misconduct, fraud, embezzlement, manipulation of project bids. There were attachments. Screenshots of internal emails, doctored spreadsheets bearing my name and digital signature, falsified reports showing money moved into consulting fees, accounts that I'd never seen before. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. My first thought was that this was a setup. My second thought was, how the heck is this so detailed? The last page of the letter simply read, "You're being watched. And you're not the only one who knows." I don't remember what happened the rest of that day. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the papers, half of me wanting to call someone, anyone, and the other half terrified to move. Celia came home around 9 that night. She said she'd had dinner with her book club. I stared at her as she poured herself a glass of red wine and settled into the couch like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't detonated something inside my head at that funeral. I asked her, flat out, if she knew anything about a complaint being made at my firm. She looked at me over her glass and said, "Is that what you're worried about now? Not your boss? Not your job? Just yourself?" Then she turned on the TV. Didn't speak to me again that night. The next morning, I brought the letter to the firm. I went to HR, told them someone was trying to frame me. They were already expecting me. I was placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. No access to files. No communication with staff. They already had their doubts. The walls were closing in fast. And in the days that followed, it all unraveled fast and harsh. A whistleblower inside the firm leaked the story to a small Chicago financial blog. Then the local paper picked it up. Within 72 hours, my name and face were all over the news. Senior partner under investigation in massive architecture firm impropriety. My inbox was flooded. I got voicemails from clients I hadn't heard from in years. My LinkedIn inbox filled up with people asking what happened. My mother called, voice shaking, asking if I was going to jail. And Celia? She didn't say a word. She packed a suitcase the following weekend and left without saying goodbye. No note this time. No warning. I'd never felt so hollow in my life. The rest came in waves. I hired a lawyer. We combed through every project, every login, every digital trail. It took weeks, but eventually, a picture started to form. The evidence had been planted using an administrative backdoor into our firm's internal system. A clone login was used, one that mimicked mine almost exactly. The IP address linked back to an office computer belonging to Quinn LaRose. Quinn was a junior partner. Ambitious, arrogant, barely 30, and already acting like he owned the place. I never liked him, but I never suspected. It was worse than that. Because Quinn wasn't just the guy trying to destroy my career. He was sleeping with my wife. And apparently, he had been for over a year. The news about Quinn didn't come in a dramatic revelation. It wasn't a confession or a confrontation, it was data. Cold, unforgiving data. Our lawyer had pulled security logs, metadata, and device traces. IP addresses were matched, timestamps aligned. The activity that framed me? All of it originated from a company laptop assigned to Quinn. He'd accessed files after hours, on weekends, even while I was out of the country for a conference. And then there were the emails. Not the kind you'd expect to find between coworkers, let alone a subordinate and the wife of a senior partner. They weren't love letters. They weren't even passionate. They were strategic, detached, calculated. Messages like, he'll be too distracted with Keen's death to notice anything for a while. If we can pull this off, they'll clear a path for the board vote. Don't worry. He's too proud to suspect you'd ever betray him. My stomach turned reading them. There were dozens. Attached images, screenshots of financial documents, suggestions for which passwords to try, which project folders were most likely to have limited oversight. She had helped him plan it. And then I saw one that ended with, once he's out, the firm is yours. And I'm free. Celia had always been ambitious. She'd once told me that marrying an architect meant learning to live in someone else's blueprints. I thought she meant it poetically, like adapting to another person's dream. But I think she meant it literally. She wanted to tear it down and rebuild it in her own image. With Quinn, that realization broke something inside me. Not because I still loved her by then. I wasn't sure if I had in years. But because we'd spent 2 decades building a life. We'd buried parents, survived infertility, remodeled 2 homes, planned vacations we never took, dreamed up retirement plans that now felt like stories belonging to strangers. And she threw it all away with the precision of a demolition crew. Word of the impropriety spread faster than I could process it. Colleagues stopped returning calls. Longtime friends quietly removed me from group chats. Some family members asked awkward questions. Others stopped asking anything at all. I found myself waking up at 3 a.m., not in panic, but in a kind of numb disorientation. As if my mind had detached from time. Days blurred together. My apartment, previously a home, felt like a waiting room for bad news. My lawyer, a woman named Drayton, advised me to stay quiet. Let the investigation work in your favor, she said. If we get the right forensic angle, we can clear your name without you needing to go public. But the media didn't wait. And the court of public opinion didn't need more than a headline. They painted me as the fool, the token executive, the guy who got promoted out of pity and fell for his own myth. Every article included an unflattering photo sweaty from a conference, mid-blink at a ribbon cutting, one even cropped from a funeral, for God's sake. But worse than the articles were the comments. No wonder his wife left. Promoted by a dead man and exposed by a letter? You can't write this stuff. He probably signed the fake invoices himself and tried to pin it on the junior guy when he got caught. I stopped reading after that. Meanwhile, Quinn vanished. He left Chicago within 48 hours of being notified of the investigation. A subpoena followed, but he was nowhere to be found. Rumors circulated he'd gone to Mexico or New Zealand or hiding out with family in Maine. The firm tried to downplay it, but internally, they were panicking. The auditors were tearing through everything, and the board was trying to figure out how they'd missed something so massive right under their noses. Celia, for her part, was quieter than I expected. I tracked her down through her sister in Evanston. She was staying in an Airbnb near Oak Park, not far from her old college campus. She refused to meet me in person. All I got was a phone call, short, clipped, cold. I don't know why you're acting surprised. You've been married to your job for 17 years. I just finally found someone who wanted more. Don't try to contact me again. Everything else can go through attorneys. I remember hanging up and just staring at my reflection in the kitchen window. The outside world was blurry, just streetlights in motion. I looked like someone else. Someone older. Someone tired. That week, the firm finally issued a statement. They confirmed that I had been cleared of all wrongdoing and was cooperating with authorities. They suspended Quinn indefinitely and opened civil proceedings against him. There was no apology, no reinstatement, no acknowledgement of what I'd lost. Just a single sentence in a 2-page memo. We thank Mr. Parnell for his cooperation during this difficult time. That was it. That was the end of my career in corporate architecture. Not with a bang, but a whimper in a legal document. And through all of it, the whispers continued. In grocery store aisles, at the gym, even in the elevator of my apartment complex. Some said I deserved it. Others speculated that I was part of the scheme and just got cold feet. Very few believed me. But most just enjoyed the show. Because in this world, impropriety sells. And when your pain comes with a plot twist, people treat it like entertainment. I wish I could say there was a moment, just one, where I screamed, cried, punched a wall, let it all out. But I didn't. I didn't have the energy to be angry. What I felt most was embarrassment. Not just for being betrayed, but for not seeing it coming. For being so wrapped up in work, in chasing respect, in trying to become the man Marshall thought I could be, that I didn't even notice my own life slipping out from under me. People often talk about betrayal like it's a blade in the back. Sudden, violent, obvious. Mine was more like rust. Slow, silent, eating away at everything until the whole structure collapsed with a groan. I moved out of the condo Celia and I had shared in West Loop. Too many memories there, and not the good kind. The kitchen where she used to hum while chopping garlic. The corner by the window where I caught her staring into space for minutes at a time in the last year. The guest bedroom where, as it turns out, she'd sometimes sleep while telling me it was because I was snoring. I found a short-term rental in Logan Square, a one-bedroom above a nail salon. The kind of place where the walls were thin and the pipes groan at night, but the rent was cheap and no one knew my name. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of court paperwork, forensic audits, and silence. My lawyer, Drayton, pushed for the firm to clear my name publicly. They refused. Said it would draw more attention. Attention? My face had been on local news twice. An op-ed in the Sun-Times asked whether white-collar criminals like me deserved jail or just to be quietly removed from the corporate food chain. The headline used a photo of me from the holiday party 2 years ago, Celia, standing next to me in a red dress, smiling. She looked radiant. I looked tired. I couldn't stop thinking about how well she'd played it. How calmly she'd sat next to me at meetings, parties, even our anniversary dinner just weeks before Marshall died, knowing the whole time that she and Quinn were setting me up to fall. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control, power, image. Celia had always had a complicated relationship with success. She wanted it, yes, but she also wanted people to see her as deserving of it. And somewhere along the line, I'd stopped being part of her success story. I'd become a liability. And Quinn, well, he was everything I wasn't. Young, smooth, hungry. He didn't have a past to drag around. No gray in his beard. No failed projects on his record. No years of corporate fatigue dulling his ambition. I understood why she chose him, but I couldn't understand how she chose to destroy me in the process. Eventually, Quinn was tracked down by the feds in a rental property in Arizona. He didn't resist. He didn't confess either, just lawyered up, fast and hard. The money trail was long, but not impenetrable. Celia's fingerprints weren't on any bank transfers. She hadn't taken any funds directly, but the emails were damning. And the timeline aligned with travel, meetings, her login access built a convincing case that she was at the very least complicit. She was never charged. Not officially. Too careful. Too clean. But her name was included in every article about the case from then on. The firm fired Quinn, obviously. Filed a civil suit. He countersued, claimed wrongful termination. That drama is still playing out in court, and I've removed myself from it entirely. I gave my deposition. I showed them the evidence. And I walked away. Because I realized something somewhere in that mess of depositions, cold conference rooms, and press headlines. I didn't want my old life back. Not the corner office. Not the after-hours meetings. Not the constant need to prove that I was worthy of a title I barely even had time to enjoy. Not the parties with clients where Celia would smile tightly, like she was waiting for someone better to walk into the room. Not the marriage. I didn't miss the way she used to sigh when I talked about a new project. I didn't miss the way her compliments always came with a caveat. I'm proud of you, but you need to be more assertive, or you're talented, but you lack presence. I didn't miss wondering if her silence meant disappointment or just boredom. No, what I missed was feeling like my life was my own. So I started building it again. Slowly, I took up walking. Long walks, without a destination. Through Humboldt Park. Down Milwaukee Avenue. I got to know the neighborhood, the coffee shop owner with the tattooed forearms and good memory. The bookstore clerk who always recommended true crime. The old man who fed pigeons near the train tracks every afternoon. I started sketching again. Not buildings, but people. Faces. Hands. The way light fell through cafe windows. It didn't mean anything. I didn't show anyone. But it was mine. Sometimes, people would recognize me. At first, I'd freeze, bracing for a comment, a question, an insult. But most of the time, they'd just nod. Sometimes ask, "Hey, weren't you that guy?" And then let it go. The impropriety was fading. But the damage wasn't. I still had no idea what to do next. I couldn't go back to architecture the way I'd known it. My reputation might have survived on paper, but in my industry, stories matter more than facts. And mine was a cautionary tale. I wasn't the villain. I was the fool. The man who didn't see it coming. The guy whose wife whispered the end shot into his ear at a funeral. There's something humbling about starting over after 40. You don't get the same grace you did in your 20s. There's no finding yourself narrative that people cheer for. They expect you to have things figured out by now. And when you don't, they look at you like a cautionary tale they're relieved not to be part of. That was my life, 6 months after the letter. The investigation was over. My name cleared, but quietly. Celia had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't contest. What was the point? She asked for the condo, the car, and half of my savings. The irony? She probably would have gotten more if she hadn't dragged my name through the mud. My lawyer was surgical Drayton, didn't miss a beat. We let the emails speak for themselves. The judge didn't need much convincing. We settled. No dramatic courtroom scene. No face-to-face confrontation. Just paperwork, polite nods, and silence. I walked out of that courtroom a free man with a fractured soul. It's funny, after everything, it wasn't the money or the impropriety that left the biggest scar. It was the realization that I had been invisible in my own marriage for years. I was a placeholder, a symbol of stability, something for Celia to leverage when it suited her. And when it didn't, she rewrote the story and cast me as the fool. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It had dulled into something ambient, like a background hum in a quiet room. Always there, but not always noticeable. I spent a lot of time alone. That wasn't new. I'd always been a bit of a loner. But now it wasn't solitude. It was exile. One rainy Thursday, I found myself back on the north side, near where Celia and I used to live when we were just starting out. Before the promotions, before the parties, before the suits and speeches. Back when we shared ramen noodles and fought over thermostat settings. I walked past our old apartment building. The bricks hadn't changed. The fire escape still looked half-rusted. But something about it felt unreal, like it belonged to another life. Another person. A younger me who still believed in things like loyalty and fairness and growing old with someone you trusted. I didn't cry. I didn't even pause for long. I just stared up at the window that used to be ours, nodded once to no one, and kept walking. Eventually, I got a call from an old colleague, Brenner. We hadn't talked in months. He was one of the few who hadn't turned on me, hadn't laughed, hadn't vanished. "Look," he said, "I know you're probably not interested, but there's a small firm in Evanston. Just opened. They're looking for a project lead for some community work. Low stakes, low drama. You'd be good at it." I almost said no. Then I remembered something Marshall once told me. Back when I was still junior and naive and staying late every night. He said, "Everyone chases the top. But the middle? The middle's where the real work gets done." So I called the firm. The interview wasn't glamorous. Just a small room with mismatched chairs and a chipped table. The partners were two women in their 30s, sharp, smart, grounded. They didn't ask about the impropriety. Didn't bring up the past. They just said, "We saw your work on the Kensington Library project. It was thoughtful. Thoughtful. Not flashy. Not profitable. Not award-winning. Thoughtful." I took the job. The pay was modest. No corner office. No title to brag about. But the work mattered, designing spaces for schools, senior centers, shelters. Places where people actually live. It didn't fix me, but it reminded me of who I used to be. Who I might still be, buried under the debris. As for Celia, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she moved to DC. Apparently working with a nonprofit tied to urban development. Funny, right? After everything, she still ended up in buildings. Quinn, on the other hand, disappeared again. His lawyers negotiated some kind of settlement, and last I heard, he'd moved to Florida. Real estate or crypto, no one seems sure. He'll resurface again, I'm sure. Guys like that always do. I don't think about him much anymore. But Celia? She lingers. Not in the romantic sense. I don't miss her. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wonder if she ever looks back. If she ever regrets it. If there's a part of her that realizes how close she came to having everything she claimed to want without destroying it all. But then again, maybe she doesn't. Maybe the version of her I miss never existed at all. Life didn't go back to normal. It went forward. I worked quietly at the new firm. No fanfare. No high-stakes clients. Just good people trying to build good things. I started mentoring interns, kids like I used to be. Wide-eyed. Full of ideas. Not yet worn down by corporate greed or betrayal. It was healing, in a way. Helping someone else grow while I rebuilt what was left of myself. Then one morning, almost a year after the impropriety broke, I got an email. Subject line: opportunity to contribute. Architecture Now podcast. I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. It was from a journalist named Liv Ramirez. She'd been covering corruption and power torment in design industries for years. I'd read some of her work. Tough but fair. Not the tabloid type. She said she was working on a series about how power, money, and ego shape architecture, and she wanted to interview me. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to drag the past back into the light. I'd finally found a little peace. But then I thought about all the people who had stayed silent while I got publicly shredded. All the complicit looks. The backroom laughter. And how Celia had walked away without a single consequence, still charming rooms full of strangers, rewriting history to cast herself as the phoenix rising from a man's mistakes. So I said yes. The interview wasn't salacious. Liv didn't ask gotcha questions. She let me tell the whole story, from the funeral whisper to the anonymous letter to Quinn's disappearance. We talked about ego, power, how easy it is to ignore red flags when they're dressed in ambition and wrapped in praise. I never used Celia's full name. I didn't need to. The facts were enough. The podcast dropped 3 weeks later. It exploded. Within days, downloads passed the million mark. It wasn't just architects listening. It was people in finance, law, medicine, anywhere someone had ever been betrayed by the person they trusted most. My inbox overflowed. Not with hate, but with gratitude. I thought I was the only one who got blindsided by someone they loved. Thank you for showing that it's possible to survive it. You put into words what I've been carrying in silence for years. But that wasn't the revenge. That came later. Turns out, Celia had been working with a large nonprofit that specialized in urban redevelopment. She'd climbed high, fast used the impropriety for sympathy, painting herself as a woman whose marriage fell apart under the weight of professional betrayal. They loved her narrative. Until the podcast, Liv's team had done their homework. Without naming Celia, they laid out timelines, data trails, anonymous witness interviews, all scrubbed, all legal, but clear to anyone who connected the dots. 2 weeks after the episode aired, an internal ethics review was launched at the nonprofit. 3 weeks after that, she was quietly asked to resign. She never reached out, never sent a text, never tried to explain. But someone sent me a screenshot of a leaked company memo thanking her for her contributions and noting her departure to pursue new opportunities. It was polite, corporate, empty, but it was enough. I sat on my balcony that night, scotch in hand, listening to the city. The sun was setting behind the skyline I used to see from a corner office I no longer missed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. She didn't go to jail. She wasn't humiliated on national television. There was no shouting match or dramatic confrontation. Just truth, served slow and steady. The best revenge wasn't in destroying her. It was in reclaiming my story, taking back the narrative she tried to write for me, letting the world see who I really was, not the joke she whispered about, but the man who stood back up, told the truth, and built something better from the rubble. I still walk a lot, still draw. Sometimes I stop by the Kensington Library, the project I designed before everything fell apart. It's quiet there, peaceful. They don't know who I am when I visit. They don't have to. I know, and that's enough.